This is my story of overcoming self-imposed restrictions of the mind related to video games and taking steps toward personal freedom. I'll be focusing on Pokemon games since I'm a Pokemaniac. Some of these things I want to do for years, like Beating Pkmn X or Y. I'll also give some of my thoughts on these 3DS Pokemon games, showcase a full-odd shiny I found in Sun, and even show some skateboarding. Now a disclaimer, I know some people might consider some of the things I mentioned in this video to be OCD. I did consider myself as someone who had it for about 10 years. Now this is not advice, but for me personally, I found that the less I used the term, the more I began to shift my identity towards someone who is free of that. Anyway, here are my top 10 video game wins from recently. I hope you enjoy. So the first 3DS Pokemon game I beat the main story of was Alpha Sapphire. I'll go into more detail about the mental blocks with playing 3DS Pokemon games later in this video, but I'd only briefly played previous game cards of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire up until this point when I bought Alpha Sapphire again in February 2023. I wavered between wanting to go for a shiny starter and just playing through the game with a normal one. I didn't want to wait a while potentially to experience the game, but at the same time I thought it'd be really cool to play through it with a shiny starter. So for months I did some soft resets for starters, for all of them at some point, mainly going for Torchic though, and then when I got this trainer ID in September, I feel like I was more ready to play through the game. Me personally, I prefer to go for cool looking trainer IDs. I just like seeing those when I go to the summary of Pokemon. It can also help me commit to save files, which it did for this one. Another thing that really helped me was getting the shiny Mudkip. I talked about this shiny in a previous video, but it was really cool to get my first Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire shiny. And after that, I knew I was ready to play the game. I really enjoyed this game, loved the graphics. It was cool seeing how they approach remakes of games I have so much nostalgia with. I remember how amazed I was seeing this part of the route for the first time in Alpha Sapphire, and on my most recent playthrough, seeing Rustboro City. Now here are some more things I liked in addition to the graphics, and some things I didn't like. So I was a huge fan of Mauville City in the originals. It just felt like a pivotal part of the game, getting access to the bike and the Pokemon Daycare Center. And I enjoyed rebattling trainers on the east and west routes to level up my team and also help with the Pokedex. But in the remakes, Mauville City just felt too expansive. Having to go through a building to access the routes around it made me not want to use this as a hatching route. Also, I don't know why they decided to include this clicking sound when on the bike. To me, it just seemed like the music would have been much better without that. Of course, I didn't like the shiny locks, but I did appreciate that they locked the Poochyena at the beginning of the game. And there were many legendaries available to catch, ones that could be shiny hunted. And I appreciated that they made fishing easier than in Ruby Sapphire Emerald. The super training feature felt refined, and it was pretty easy to EV train Pokemon. Plus they capped the EVs for a stat at 252. Also, I liked the post game. It was so cool finally being able to catch Deoxys after all those years of playing Ruby Sapphire, wishing that the rumors about Deoxys and the space station were true, and how awesome that the battle was in space. Even though the hatching route for the first Pokemon Daycare wasn't ideal, at least they include a second Daycare. And for that one, even though there was some deep sand in the path, it was nice that I could just press up the whole time and go around the island and hatch eggs. Anyway, I had a lot of fun playing this game. Pretty early on during the playthrough of my current Pokemon Sun save file, I traded over Wonder Trade. It was not easy, but I had motivation too because I knew the 3DS online services were ending soon, and I wanted to try online trading in Sun and Moon before then. Now, while I played through the game mostly with my own Pokemon, the traded ones did contribute. It definitely made me uncomfortable to think about those helping me play through the game, level up my team, unlock items, catch Pokemon, but I kept in mind my goals of having fun and beating the main story of Pokemon Sun, which I did late 2023. So mental blocks did come up as I was playing through the game, but I more so had trouble with this years ago on a previous attempt and game card. More on that another time. I will say though that completing Alpha Sapphire prepared me for this Pokemon Sun playthrough. Now overall I really enjoyed this game. Here are my thoughts on it, a few likes and dislikes. I love the soundtrack and the whole island vibe. I also liked how there were multiple islands instead of a single map. It made things more interesting. Though there were times where I didn't know which island something was on and it took me some time to find it. I also liked how it wasn't always just a straight line to get to the next city. I feel like a more open, free world. I also liked the ride Pokemon feature. It was fun traveling around with those. Two small complaints with that though. I couldn't find a way to make it so no Pokemon were set to certain buttons, to unassign them from them. And there were times where I tried to call a ride Pokemon in by accidentally pressing the D-pad. I loved the quick link feature though, it made trading so much quicker and easier. I definitely struggled at times to switch Pokemon in the party, being so used to the previous way of doing it. As I was filming a clip for that, I found out it's actually easier than I thought. Now, I'm sure you expected this complaint, the cutscenes. As a shiny hunter, the one I think of first is the one at the start of the game. I would have loved to have soft reset for a shiny starter, but I was not about to put myself through that. And going along with shiny hunting, of course I was not a fan of the shiny locks. But at least there are a lot of huntable legendaries in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. Also, I thought Potown was interesting. And though it didn't have the most optimistic name, this area was cool. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing Pkmn Sun. After years of wanting one, I finally bought a Nintendo Switch at the end of 2023. I also bought Let's Go Pikachu. It was so awesome to finally get to experience that game fully. I only briefly played my cousin's Let's Go Eevee back in 2019. Another step outside my comfort zone, honestly, was using a gift card I received to pay for some of the purchase. This was the only way at the time that I could really conceive of making a close to $300 purchase. Though some illogical, ego-based thoughts were trying to convince me that doing that would mean I wasn't buying these things completely myself. But I did. I went to the store and bought them with the help of my gift card. I remember how incredible it was leaving Target knowing I had finally bought a Nintendo Switch. And the same month I also got Violet. It's so cool to have a Switch now. It's probably about time I bought some games other than Pokemon though. There's some other fun ones I'd like to experience. Using third-party equipment to help gain access to past Pokemon events was a huge step toward overcoming my fixation with playing Pokemon games legitimately and then some. Though I'm not condoning this, I completely understand if anyone does this, especially for earlier generations. If someone managed to find out about a Pokemon event in time in the earlier days of the internet, they had to go to a specific real-world location during a limited time and date. Seriously, this Mew was only available for 3 hours at Toys R Us one day in 2006. Yeah, I do feel the elusivity of these events did make them that much more exciting when I did find out about them in time. I managed to get one event Pokemon from the first 3 generations. It was one I randomly encountered. I was at an amusement park and I saw they were giving out Celebi and Gold and Silver. I ran to the car to get my Game Boy and Pokemon Silver version, and a guy transferred a level 10 Celebi using what looked like an arcade machine and a link cable. Now for the Gen 4 and 5 events, I made quite a few trips to GameStop, often without purchasing anything, getting the Pokemon from the car when the signal was good enough. And I remember asking my friend to turn around and go back to GameStop because I realized I hadn't received Celebi. I also remember standing in Toys R Us downloading the events to all my Gen 4 games. Now, I like to give the previous owner the benefit of the doubt if I buy a used game that happens to have event Pokemon on it. It's a whole different thing though if someone's making multiple sales of Pokemon events, or game cards with them on it, claiming they're legit. Personally, I'm not going to pay extra for something I could easily do. So the 2 options I consider nowadays for Pokemon events are using glitches or third-party tools. Glitches in Pokemon games have progressed a ton since 2010, when I took 60k plus steps in the void trying to get to Darkrai. I didn't end up getting it to work. Luckily there are much easier and quicker void glitch methods now. That's how I got to Darkrai and Shaman. I ended up shiny hunting for both of those, found Darkrai in 2022, and Shaman the next year. Now as for Mew on Faraway Island and Emerald, I would have preferred to have used the Pomegranate Berry glitch to access it, but neither guides for the English or Japanese games worked for me. I did get some interesting results though. I wasn't about to spend $200 plus on English Emerald version, mainly just so I could glitch there. I wanted to be more resourceful. So I ended up buying an R4 for under $20 too. I felt better about this approach than warping there with the Game Shark, for example, since the game was resting directly on the DS without any intermediary devices. In ways like a different form of the original event, where instead of Nintendo having it on a game card or machine, I have it on R4. And even though, like I said, my first choice was to glitch to the island, this was definitely easier, and I feel like it leads to the most true experience of the original event. And being flexible about how I access these events has led to a lot of cool potential shiny hunts. And of course it was cool to experience these events. I'd warped to these Pokemon before, but I hadn't ever reached them using the event items. I faced a lot of resistance over the years to playing video games outside due to cleanliness fixations, but during my level 100 quest in Ruby last year, I felt ready to take some steps to overcome this. I then really practiced this during my challenge of finding 5 shiny Pokemon at the park. Obstacles with cleanliness and also self-consciousness about playing the games around other people continually came up, but it grew easier the more and more I stepped outside my comfort zone. Plus, people care a lot less than I often think they do. Trading with my friend in Scarlet and Violet was huge progress because I tend to feel like I need to do basically everything myself, especially when it comes to Pokemon games. But I'm proud of myself for trading with him anyway. It reminded me of what's important for me with video games. Having fun and embracing the community aspect. Now, months later I did end up trading online via the Home app, but I didn't keep those Pokemon for very long. I was struggling with not knowing whether or not the Pokemon were obtained legitimately. I knew my friend had obtained his legitimately. I could see myself trading online again in the future though. Now these next two wins relate to transferring Mesprit and Shiny Exeggutor after restoring the save files using third-party backup software, and also bringing them to Pokemon Home through Pokemon Bank that may or may not have been installed through alternate means. I'll start with the Shiny Exeggutor. I initially backed up and restored my Pokemon Sun save file as a way to clone the Shiny, so I could have it in Gen 7 and also the Switch games. I have one in each now, but I'll likely delete one. Personally, it just doesn't really resonate with me to clone Shinies, even ones I found legitimately myself. Now, I do still think it'd be cool to reclaim the Shiny Execute I lost in Leaf Green back in 2012, but still, I'm psyched on this Shiny Exeggutor. That was difficult to say, and I think it's funny how it's not shown completely on this screen. The night I found this was one of those times I had an intuitive feeling to keep hunting a little longer than I initially planned, and maybe 10 minutes later the Shiny appeared. I'll admit I definitely got triggered by the fact that I found it before midnight and caught it after, so the summary showed the next calendar day. I'm super grateful I found and caught it, especially considering it had Woodhammer, which admittedly I was not very prepared for. Also, this was my first Shiny in Gen 7. It was so cool to see the sparkles in person for the first time. Now the next Pokemon I'll talk about transferring, Mesprit. This is for my Japanese Diamond up to Brilliant Diamond. So I backed up my Japanese Diamond file because I was going to go for a Shiny Turtwig, but decided against that due to the length of the resets and the possibility of an uncatchable Shiny. I then restored my save file. A bit later I needed to see a Mesprit to unlock the National Pokédex in Brilliant Diamond, but I wanted to leave open the possibility of hunting for it in there in the future. It made me uncomfortable to use that Mesprit to unlock the National Pokédex, Pokéradar, and various post-game areas, but I did anyway since it felt like the right move. I also transferred more Pokemon later from there to help with completing the Sinnoh Pokédex. Now these Pokemon seem different at first, but I'm progressing with this. Reminding myself they're the same Pokemon I obtained legitimately, and the same save files I put time and effort into. Now in terms of Pokemon Bank, last year I was stressing over how I was going to access it, wishing I'd kept my consoles that had it in the early days of it. I know it's my fault for not staying up to date with the closure of the eShop, but I realized I had two options if I wanted to be able to transfer Pokemon. Pay extra to a random online seller and trust they downloaded it while the eShop was online, or take a creative approach. For what it's worth, Pokemon Bank was free the last time it was available officially, and I've only transferred Pokemon I obtained legitimately. If I ever were to transfer something that was slightly less legitimate, I definitely would not use it for any online battling or trading. It is very helpful to be able to transfer Pokemon for the Pokédex, and things to help catch other Pokemon. With Deoxys, for example, for a while that was the only way for me to get it in Pokemon Home. More recently I did get one in Pokemon Go, but that one's going to stay there. It's a freeing feeling to have the option of transferring Pokemon from my Generation 3 games all the way up to Gen 9. The next win, and the one that was most difficult of all these for me, finally beating Pokemon X more than a decade after it was released. So back in October 2013, I picked them both up from GameStop, set them on the front seat, and felt this mix of excitement but more so anxiety. I was excited to experience a new region, but some illogical fears about my environment like cleanliness and other things were coming up again. I faced a fork in the road moment. Was I going to face difficult thoughts and emotions which would lead to me being able to do the thing I actually wanted to do? Or was I going to stay stuck in familiar patterns? I chose the latter. It was a terrible feeling like I was giving up. I placed the sealed X and Y in a bin in my closet and returned to the Pokemon generations I was most comfortable with, the first 5, especially 3, 4, and 5 for shiny hunting. I remember sitting in the parking lot of the college I went to at the time and watching videos of people shiny hunting in Pokemon X and Y. It was painful to want to play through the games and shiny hunt in them too, but I feel like I couldn't. So pretty soon after getting X and Y, I got the special edition Blue 3DS, only to not play that either, and have that sit in a bin. Later my friend offered me his 3DS XL and Pokemon Y, which I did end up buying. It was actually easier for me to play a used game and console, keeping the previous save file. I felt like it led to me accepting a lot of imperfection from the start. It was a really fun experience being able to fly to all the cities and explore the different areas as soon as I got the game. And I did do some shiny hunting on that Pokemon Y, finding 2 shinies in hordes, Mareep and Gulpin. Mareep was in my college dorm at the time, probably at like 4 a.m. and I found at least 15 chain fishing shinies, doing some of the hunting at a local cafe, which thinking back is pretty fitting for X and Y. Then in the summer of 2014, my friend texted me a photo of a shiny Pansy he found while playing through Y. It was so cool to see that. At the same time though, I was struggling because that reminded me that I wanted to beat X or Y but felt like I couldn't. But it was a good thing because it was another nudge to overcome those blocks and play the games. I also got Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire around release date, Didn't open those for about a year. In 2015 for the Hoopa McDonald's event. Probably opened X and Y around that time too, and both 3DSs. But then I sold my whole video game collection approximately early 2017. I just felt like I would benefit from space from Pokemon games. I was already really into skateboarding, but I focused on it even more after that. Let's fast forward to February 2023 when I bought a 2DS. It had Pokemon Crystal VC and Pokemon X already downloaded on it, but I felt this obsessive need to be the one to set up the console. Over the years I just got in the habit of factory resetting any used consoles I bought, once I had the option to at least. Made some progress with this recently though, I didn't reset the capture card DS I bought last year. Anyway, I went back and forth with what to do about the 2DS. I ended up resetting it, which I instantly regretted since I had given into the obsessions and I had lost the games. Or so I thought. Early next year I received a comment saying it might be possible to re-download them. To my surprise I was able to re-download Pokemon X. I was psyched. I knew it was my chance to redeem myself for not playing through X and Y in the early days and for resetting the console. Now I normally prefer physical games over digital ones, so the fact that this was digital and the previous owner had downloaded it definitely made me uncomfortable. My desire to play the game though was stronger than the fears, which helped me overcome the resistance. I had a kind of false start with the game on the day of the solar eclipse. I got a few badges, but resistance from the early days of X and Y was surfacing again, and I was also stressing over how to make a video out of my playthrough. I ended up restarting, but the game was still in the back of my mind as the months went on. And then last November I got a trainer ID I liked, and I had a feeling that this time I was going to complete the main story. Here's some of my thoughts from that playthrough. I love the scenery, and I thought the music was great. And they even include a shiny Pokemon statue. Now 2 small complaints though. How are they going to let me bike on sand and in water, but not in a cave? Also, I found myself often instinctively pressing the circle pad and getting on the rollerblades when I didn't want to, and then having trouble with precise movements. That said, I'm really glad they included the blading feature. This description of Route 5 reminded me of how a good number of skateboarders tend to go to LA. They even had skate parks, something I'm familiar with. Though I was unsure about them at first, I've really started to appreciate Mega Evolutions. It's awesome seeing new forms of familiar Pokemon. And of course it was fun seeing what the shiny Megas look like. In the early days of the games I remember Mega evolving my shiny Mewtwo and Y. I love the Horde feature too, especially for shiny hunting. And I can finally rest during my Pokemon adventures. Even though I wasn't a fan of the camera angles at times, I enjoyed Lumiose City. And when I got lost, at least there were options. And it was cool how my perspective of the places I'd seen in the used Y shifted as I experienced the storyline of these games. Like this place I hatched some Eevee at in 2014 was right by a gym. I thought Den Mill City was cool, but being an outdoors enthusiast, these two were my favorite. There was even grass on the roof of this gym. It just might be my favorite gym ever in a Pokemon game. I thought the rain on the touchscreen when it was raining was a nice detail, and I like this quote. This dialogue was so relatable. There have been many times where there was something I wanted to do, but I felt stuck. This battle between the intuitive part and the fear-based part. But I'm getting better with this. So resistance definitely came up as I was playing through the game. Sometimes I took weeks off, but I began to accept that the imperfections, some of them triggering, are guaranteed. And I got better with this as I continued through the game. And by the time I made it to Xerneas, I knew that this time I was going to complete Pokemon X. It was so cool to finally catch Xerneas. But I will say the 8th gym puzzle was surprisingly easy. I thought it was really cool to be able to find Hydreigon in the wild though. Another quote I liked, and Slowbro can learn Flamethrower. It was so amazing to make it to the Pokemon League finally, and to see that for the first time. Here's the team I had before battling the champion. Champion battle seemed too easy, honestly. I got to her last Pokemon and only had one of mine faint. But it was an incredible feeling to finally beat the Pokemon League in X and Y after all these years. It's the meme guy. Now I finally understand the origin of that. I definitely didn't expect to battle him or anyone after being the champion. It was a nice surprise to get a starter egg here. I did not expect that either. Or it to flee before I did anything. What? I didn't even get to throw a ball or attack it. But I'm psyched to have finally beat Pokemon X more than 11 years after it was released. And the last one, buying a used Nintendo Switch product. While I bought many older used games and consoles, for years I wanted to buy a used Switch product. I felt this need to continue buying them brand new. But on March 17th, I saw an opportunity to overcome that. I saw a Switch Lite I wanted, not a Nintendo Lite Switch. I didn't have access to the car I normally did, and the one I was dropping brought up some contamination-based fears. I was tempted to see if I could pick it up on Sunday when I would have access to a car I was more comfortable in. I knew that would be a loss to give into the fear-based thinking. And another win going along with this is that I picked it up in person. I normally definitely prefer to just buy things online, but shipping wasn't an option for this. It's all good, that led to me getting past multiple mental obstacles. I definitely could see myself buying a used Switch game at some point. I feel much more ready for that step now. So with all these things, there were inner battles where it's like, I want to do this thing, but fear, rigidity, etc. is stopping me, or it felt like that. But I decided to take action on what I felt drawn to and took small intuitive steps to get there. And as I took those steps, anxiety often increased at first, but pretty quickly subsided as I realized I was okay and the fears were unfounded. It's an ongoing journey, but I'm grateful for the progress I've made. Thank you so much for watching, wishing you the best.